What's a weird scary childhood memory you didn't realize the seriousness of until you were an adult? My dad attacking my mom. I remember one fight specifically. I must have been about 2, and I asked if she was okay, then started playing with my toys while they were still fighting. It also occurred to me, much later in life, how desensitized I must have been to just continue playing. I remember this too. And it was more fucked up because I think I remember my mom saying stuff like, "It's okay, just go over there and play," while they continued to scream and fight and yell. So we'd go over there and play worriedly and keep looking up at them, and my mom would say, "It's okay, we're not fighting, we're just in a disagreement, we're not fighting." Meanwhile dad is flipping the table over, screaming. Mom is screaming and crying. "It's okay, we're not fighting." I distinctly remember having just learned how to draw an octagon and that octagons were stop signs in either preschool or kindergarten. So I frantically drew my dad a stop sign to get him to stop hitting my mom. Really fucked up memory. I broke my collarbone when I was 4. I ran down the driveway and tripped. My mom had just had a baby, like, a few days before. So my dad took me to the hospital. He was a good dad, but he's very gruff, no nonsense, and presents a little bit intimidating. He was a cop. She fell. I can imagine him saying. The doctor and nurse made him leave the room with me and asked me, "Did your dad do this to you? Did your dad hurt you?" I was completely confused because why would someone's dad ever hurt them? No, I guess they believed me because they let me leave with him in my cast. It was like a heavy tank top. In the summer, when I remembered this later and realized why they were asking, it made me sad to think these questions have to be asked. This happened to both my brother and I. We were very clumsy children. I broke my arm twice in the matter of a year, and in that same year, he had to get stitches from running into a chair and lost a few of his teeth from running into a door. So we were frequent flyers to the ER that year. I was like 6 and he was like 3. So after the second visit we both sat down with CPS and they questioned us. No abuse happened, so nothing came of it, but by the 4th incident that year they did say they contemplated not taking my brother to the ER because they were genuinely worried they wouldn't walk out with him. And it was the lost teeth incident, so they weren't sure if they could do anything anyway. I had a great uncle who I was always creeped out by as a child. I just didn't like being around him. He was creepy and liked to tickle a lot. I was kinda reserved child and didn't want some weird guy tickling me. I remember I had to hide behind their sofa one time so he would leave me alone. My mom didn't like him either, but we had to visit because she liked my aunt and not many people visited. Turns out, he is a pedophile. Got arrested and convicted 2 years ago. Almost exactly the same story for me. The only difference is he was my grandpa's best friend and it only came out when he died. He never hurt any of our family, but he abused all of his daughters and granddaughters. I don't think my grandpa has ever got over it. They were best friends for decades and he had no idea of the monster he was allowing to be close to his family. I was maybe 14 or 15, so not childhood but teenage years. But me and my dad walked into Home Depot, looked around and found no one. Thought how lucky we were gonna be when there was no line at checkout. Finished our shopping 20 minutes later. Walked to the self-checkout registers because there weren't any cashiers. Walked out and was greeted by multiple police officers with rifles. Dad tells me it's just a training exercise and not to worry about it. About a week later my dad tells me that actually someone was holding employees hostage after their robbery attempt failed in the gardening section of the store. Want to be featured in my videos? Become a patron at the Patreon link in the description. Don't forget to subscribe for new videos every day. I was around 3 at the time, because my mother was pregnant with my second youngest sister, and she took me and my older sister to the local park and told us to stay there until she came back for us. Hours pass. We get hungry, tired, wet ourselves because there's no public toilets, etc. Police show up eventually, start asking us questions about who are we and where are our parents. End up at the police station. Scared we're going to get in trouble. Dad walks in and takes us home after a conversation with the police. Mom is gone and doesn't return for 2 weeks. Dad doesn't start taking long truck trips again until after my baby sister is born. My mother had gotten the pregnancy crazies and tried to abandon my sister and I. She was in a psych ward for 2 weeks because my dad came home early and caught her packing a runaway bag. What a difficult situation for everyone. I'm curious, if you don't mind, did your parents stay together after that? Unfortunately, they stayed together until my dad passed earlier this year. I'm pretty sure my mother has an undiagnosed mental illness, but my dad loved her dearly and didn't know until he was finally forced to retire from truck driving how bad it got for us kids at times. He really thought it was a one-off thing until then. Going up to a loose dog that was as tall as me and trying to pet it even though it growled at me. I did that once. It was summer and the sun had just come up. There was a very pretty dog with golden eyes trotting down the road. I went up to it and petted it. It didn't growl, didn't look at me, just stopped as I patted it on the head and stared straight ahead. Then my dad came running out of the house screaming and it trotted off. Coyote? A coyote let you pet it? Yep, it just stood there. No sound, no reaction, nothing. Just stood there for a few seconds then trotted away while my dad had an aneurysm. Sleeping on the rear window shelf of the car while on a highway trip. For no particular reason, I woke up and got down just before we crashed. Back when we lived on a military base overseas, the guards at some point started running a mirror on a stick under our car when we reached the gate, and my parents told me they were looking for people trying to sneak in. I didn't realize until I was much older that they were legitimately looking for car bombs. I'm grateful my parents lied to me about that shit. There was a house directly behind ours, separated by separate yards and a gate. The house was built similar to ours in that the second floor windows were at the exact same level as ours, allowing you to easily see into your neighbor's bedroom. I have memories of opening my bedroom door to go to bed, only to discover the neighbor had his bedroom lights on, and curtains drawn in the black of night. It was like a literal spotlight into his bedroom. He would be laying starfishes on his bed and completely naked, staring into my room masturbating. He had to be about 30-40 years old, and I was 10-15. I also cringe at the thought of how he must have watched me, unknowingly and naively undress when I wasn't aware of his presence. That and my friend's neighbor used to have video recorder aimed at her room bathroom. He would stand there naked, stroking his penis and doing other absurd gestures. We never told our parents, or hers. Years later we discovered he was also a Walmart greeter and had been arrested for a myriad of charges including filming his neighbor, child porn, and sexual assault. A Walmart greeter. Playing near the train tracks. We used to flatten coins on the tracks. When I was a kid we discovered the sensor that activated the crossing signal on the road nearby. We found out that if you lay a metal bar across the tracks at a certain point it would activate the signal. We thought it was hilarious to drop the signal and stop traffic at will. I cringe now when I think about it because we were probably committing so many crimes. We were just kids who thought we were so cool for figuring it out. One day when I was about 8 or 9, my mom and I was waiting at a bus stop to head back home after running some errands. We hadn't been waiting long before this couple slowed their car down, pulled over, and informs us that the bus we were waiting on had broken down. They insisted it would be a very long delay, if it would be able to come at all. They offered to give us a ride home. My mom immediately lied and said someone is already on the way to pick us up. I remember wondering why my mom lied, but I surprisingly didn't question it. After continuing to offer a ride and my mom refusing twice more, the couple eventually pulls off. Nothing about the couple, older, friendly or car, not the sketchy van you'd expect, screamed stranger danger to me, so I wondered why my mother kept refusing the ride. Not even 5 minutes later our bus arrives. Something similar happened to me in my teens. This guy saw me miss my bus and offered to give me a ride. I was in a hurry that day and I thought it would be fine. Needless to say, upon getting in the car my mind started to think about how stupid it was for me to do that and I could potentially die or something. The trip to the place I needed to go to thankfully was only around 10 minutes away. I am an atheist, but boy did I speak of God and being faithful and devoted that day in front of this random man. Don't get into strangers' cars even though their intentions might be good, kids. Playing with my mom's vibrator. Could be worse. You could be one of those kids breastfed until they were 9. When I was around 8 years old, I was sitting in my grandparents' hammock. I flipped it accidentally and smashed my head on the ground. I remember seeing stars and blacking out. I was afraid of getting into trouble, so I didn't tell anyone what happened. Apparently I had had a hot dog for lunch, because from that day on, My family thought I had an allergic reaction to eating hot dogs. Now that I'm older, I realize that I was having symptoms of a concussion. I'm convinced that I was almost kidnapped. We lived in a really quiet, small town. My parents' house is a corner house, with a sidewalk to the right of it. There is a stop sign in the front yard, since it's on a corner. As a child we would ride our bikes on the sidewalk literally just to the house behind our parents and back. It wasn't even like a full block, more like half a block. I was walking my bike over to the sidewalk. I was in my yard still and over by the stop sign. That's where I would always start. An older white man in a small red car stopped at the stop sign. Normal. He then rolls down his window and starts asking me really personal questions. My age, where I lived, if my parents were home, if I ride my bike often. All these questions that as a child you don't realize were bad. Then he asks me if I want to go to his house with him. I didn't hear what he said, so I shrugged. He then put the car in park and started to get out of his car. I dropped my bike and ran into my house. I don't think my parents were home at the time, 90s. They may have been though. I never told anyone, and I didn't ride my bike for several weeks after that. It wasn't until as an adult I was somehow reminded of this incident that I realized how lucky I was. He may have tried to snatch me up. Also, he very well may have just been trying to get me safely home, but I doubt it. Getting yelled at to get away from the sliding glass door as the hail died down enough to hear the sirens going off again as I saw a tornado come down in my neighborhood at the age of 8. I was on a field trip once, probably about 9 years old. We went to some farm, and this other girl and I were approached by this man. He wanted us to come over to his car and look at what he had in the trunk. So we did. It was full of porn. I remember looking at it and really not quite understanding what it was, but I wasn't afraid at all. The other girl was mostly taking to the man. I was confused by these images, so was partway in the trunk looking at the magazines and video boxes trying to figure out why he wants us to see them. It was in the middle of a field, so I'm not sure the car worked, but if I did, I suppose he could have easily trapped me in the trunk and driven off, if he was a pedo. Luckily a teacher came over and started telling that guy what he was doing wasn't okay. I'm not sure if standards of behavior back then were just way lower, or if there was something clearly wrong with this man and maybe he didn't understand what we were looking at either. I don't know. The teacher was telling him it wasn't okay, but she was doing it like you would explain to a kid that they have to keep their underwear on. Maybe she just didn't want to make a scene. But the fact that they didn't call the police is kind of amazing. Thank you for watching. Smash that like button like it's a thick booty. And don't forget to subscribe to OKPJ Dark if you like nice things, like new videos every day. See you tomorrow.